Welcome to Commercial Real Estate Pro Network CREPN Radio. Thanks for joining us. My name is J. Darren Gross. This is the podcast focused on commercial real estate investment and risk management strategies. Weekly, we have conversations with commercial real estate investors and professionals who provide their experience and insight to help you grow your real estate portfolio. Today, my guest is Michelle Bosch. She and her husband are real estate investors, entrepreneurs. They have multiple businesses, and they have taken multiple businesses, they've built from scratch to 7- and 8-figure income revenue streams. And their business platforms include land auctions, rental portfolios. They've authored an Amazon #1 bestseller called Forever Cash. And also they host together the podcast Forever Cash, and then Michelle also hosts the podcast In Flow. And in just a minute, we're going to speak with Michelle about Forever Cash. But first, a quick reminder, if you like our show, CREPN Radio, there are a couple things you can do to help us grow and grow the audience. One, you can subscribe, like, and share. And also, don't forget, you can leave a comment. We'd love to hear from our listeners. Also, if you want to see how attractive our guests are, be sure to check out our YouTube channel, and that's at Commercial Real Estate Pro Network on YouTube. Also, when you do that, if you would consider subscribing, that also helps grow the reach of our program. With that, I want to welcome my guest, Michelle. Welcome to CREPN Radio.
So much, Darren, for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here with you. Coming from nice, sunny Phoenix, Arizona, which in a few days is going to turn into 109 degrees. So we will see. But thank you so much for having me.
I'm delighted to have you, and I'm looking forward to our talk. Before we get started, if you could share with the listeners a little bit about your background.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am actually an immigrant from Honduras. I came here to the U.S. in 1995. My husband is also an immigrant from Germany, 1997. We came here to study, get our MBAs, and we did pretty much what, you're supposed to be doing. We got jobs in corporate America that, luckily were sponsoring our green cards. But after a little bit of that, 2-3 years of that, we were deeply unfulfilled. We found ourselves with, no fulfillment, no freedom. And definitely our paychecks did not match the level of energy and effort that we were putting into our jobs. But we can let go of those jobs because our permanent residency depended on those. And so we started looking for something, to do on the side, a side hustle. My family back home owns commercial real estate. And I thought, well, perhaps this would be a thing to, start with. And we actually didn't start with commercial. We looked at a single family home that we wanted to basically rehab. It was a junker here in Phoenix, Arizona. And being the immigrants that we are, we found ourselves a little bit way over our heads in terms of we had no idea how to estimate repairs, on foundations, on a kitchen, on a roof, no real expertise in managing a crew. It's not that we had bad credit, we just had no credit. And so there's a series of things that, after having that very first junker under contract, we thought, okay, real estate it is. I know it's worked for my family. My family has been able to create Forever Cash, passive cash flow from it now for years. But we probably need to start with something that, is easier for us, that we can wrap our minds around. And we stumble across something very interesting, Darren, and that is here in the US, there is such a thing as being able to lose your property to delinquent taxes. And I found about tax lien and tax deeds, and I remember going to a tax auction out in California, and needless to say, it was incredibly competitive. It was like being in a shark-infested tank. But what I noticed was that a lot of the properties that were coming, for sale, there at the auction were vacant pieces of land. And it occurred to me that if people had already, checked out from these properties, because they have to be delinquent for 5 years in the state of California, in order to be able to be sold at tax deed auction, that people were probably checking out mentally and emotionally from these properties way, way earlier. And so we decided to go ahead and reach out to, sellers of or owners of vacant land. We perfected a letter or in a method where we could buy these properties for 5 to 25 cents on the dollars, because we're not looking for motivated sellers. We're looking really for non-wanters. And we're able to quickly turn around and sell those for 60, 80, 100% of market value. We sell in one of two ways. We either sell for cash, for a quick wholesale. That would be something, 60, 70% of market value. And if we sell for 100% of market value, we sell them using seller financing, where we become the bank, and therefore we create a note. And we have residual, cash flow, monthly cash flow from a property that, for example, we bought for $1,000, that we sell for $10,000, and that where we can get, $9,000 being paid over a period of 5 years in monthly installments of $150 to $200. And one property doesn't sound as attractive, but when you have 200 to 300 loans of those, we were able, over a course of, several years, once we perfected our methodology, to really put the pedal to the metal, do over 4,000 flips, create $70,000 worth of passive cash flow. That became an 8-figure business. And we continue to do that to this day. However, as we have grown as investors and as people, I would say our sophistication when it comes to investing has also, grown. So then we found ourselves in 2009 here in Phoenix with a ton of liquidity from cash profits from the land, from the passive cash flow from the notes on the land. And we could buy properties for $50,000, single family homes, and rent them for $900 to $1,000. And so we started doing that here in Phoenix, and we did it in, 2 other markets. And kind of then, really wrap our hands around how to operate, single family homes really, really well remotely, because we're doing it, in 2 other markets other than Phoenix. And we, it came about to almost 50 rentals. And we thought, well, 2015 then came around, and we thought, how can we start looking instead of one door at a time, so that we can continue to build this passive cash flow, this what we call forever cash. And instead of looking at one door at a time, how can we start looking at, 100 doors at a time? And that's when we started, looking into multifamily. We bought our first 90 units in Louisiana, and then 94 units in North Carolina, and then 147 units in Oklahoma City. So those are the 3 markets where we're in multifamily. And I think, that's pretty much, in essence what, my story is, which is very similar probably to many of your listeners who find themselves either in a corporate job or in some kind of lifestyle where they're not fulfilled, where they have no freedom, and where their paycheck does not equate, the time and effort that you're putting. And that was pretty much us. It came out of, I would say a cosmic 4x4 of pain and discomfort from being 100% traveling every single week of the year, because we were both consultants, and not seeing each other, and not having so much to, show for it, because we were living the American dream by having payments on our cars, on our house, on our laundromats, on our sofa, on our bed frame. On pretty much everything, and yeah, that's real estate has been, and specifically land has been the cornerstone of our wealth. We continue to do it to this day. And it's a little bit of a sophisticated strategy, I would say, that we've been using now over the years. And that is, we create a lot of cash flow and cash profits with the land. And then we allocate that cash and park it into multifamily now. Because the benefit of multifamily is that all the active income that I generate on the land flips, I'm able to shield that income with depreciation from the multifamily. You know what I mean? So I feel like I get to, have the cake and eat it too. So it's like the best of both worlds. So yeah, that's kind of the story. That's how we started. It was, I think, incredible, like I said, dissatisfaction, but having a little bit of immigrant disadvantage, but also immigrant advantage. Zero fear of hard work, and seeing opportunities where others probably would have missed it, specifically on the land side, because now we teach others how to do that as well. And so the land has become something that has given us, the 4 freedoms that I think every entrepreneur and investor is looking for, which is freedom of time, freedom of money, freedom of relationships, and freedom of purpose. Because now I'm, on a mission to affect, 1,000 families in a positive way with a very simple method that we've been using now for almost 18 years, to flip land. So yeah, so it's as you grow, your sophistication basically in terms of the asset class has grown for us. So it's.
Yeah, that's a very impressive story. I mean, coming here with, essentially no relationships, no kind of a base. I always am impressed. And I do find that I think, somebody that's willing to come to this country or anything seeking opportunity is just really, it's kind of the backbone of what, the melting pot of what's made America, America. And
Yeah.
so I love to hear that. And I appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to go back to, you mentioned when you guys first came here and you were working the corporate job and you had everything financed. I mean, I think that's the thing that I think is so easy to do in America is, you can get everything on terms to where basically you can, I forget what people say. It's something about renting the lifestyle to impress people you don't know, or, something along
Yes,
those
I've heard that
terms.
expression. Yeah.
And I'm kind of curious. So was there an awareness that you were doing that, or was that just basically kind of caught up in that? Because to break from that and to get to where you're at now, I mean, obviously there were a lot of steps, and I want to talk with you a little bit more about the marketing on your land, because you mentioned the systems and stuff you put in there, but just the mindset, I guess, going from, was it more that you just recognized you wanted more, or did you realize where you were at? I think that's kind of the thing. I don't know that everybody realizes they're in this pot, and they keep looking at one more finance contract, or just another contract and another payment, but not understanding that the weight of those payments. Did you
Yeah.
guys understand the weight of those payments?
I think we understood the weight of the payments, but at the same time, it's what everyone else is doing. It's what is expected. You go to college, you get a job, and you get married, you buy a home, and you start making payments on everything pretty much, starting at the bottom of the food chain. I think what was incredibly, I think a pivotal moment for both Jack and I was, I went to school here at Thunderbird, and Robert Kiyosaki, actually the author of The Rich Dad Poor Dad, best-selling book, lives here in town. And back then, when I was a graduate student there, he had some kind of a relationship with the university where a group of students were helping him develop and market and brand and package his cash flow game. And I remember, me being friends with one of those, because I wasn't part of that group, but I remember going to, a friend's home, and he telling us all about it, and, what he was working on, and even giving us a copy of the book. And us reading that book and realizing, oh my gosh, we need to move, from, the employed, quadrant into, ideally as fast as possible, into a business, and even from a business into the investor side, as quickly as we can. And I knew it also from home, that was the way to go. That was a way to really create, cash flow that is truly, truly passive. Because when I was young, my father passed away, but 2 years prior to him passing away, he had made an investment in a commercial property back home. And it wasn't his hotshot, lawyer profession what kept my mother and I afloat. To this day, we own this property. It was that investment in that commercial property. And so how passive can it be that a person is not there physically, but continues to take care of you financially? So I knew from my background, from my family, that I had experienced this firsthand, that it was possible that what he was describing on that book, that was, that's real, that it's not just ink on a page. And I think it took my husband a little bit of a longer time, because he comes from Germany, from a society where, government is there to take care of you, in a way, and so on and so forth. And I come from a third world country where there's nothing, nothing that is going to prevent you from going down the drain and circling the drain pretty much. And so I think it took him a little bit, but once he got it, he understood it. And I think it hit home for him when 2001 came around, and we had already actually, jumped on the green card process with his company because we were doing it in parallel. And then, September 11th comes around and his company is going from, 15,000 employees to 7,000 in one day. And we're hoping, oh my gosh, that he's not one, because our green card process depends on that job. You know what I mean? So I think for him, it really hit home, within a short period of time. I was going to school in 1999, 2000 is when we were exposed to the book. 2001, it hits him. And we're like, okay, we need to put the pedal to the metal. You're right. Let's start doing something. And I think it was a, a rude awakening, but based on the circumstances where you're like, on the spot with your back against the wall, that if you're next, we need to find a job within the next 60 days or we have to leave the country. You know what I mean? That is willing to sponsor that, that working visa and that green card, status and paperwork and so on and so forth. So, so it's a little bit of being with your back against the wall, with a little bit of experience from, what I had, had in my family happen to us, firsthand, that brought us to the point where like, okay, we know that we need to break of the cycle, that it is possible, because I've seen others possible in a much smaller scale, of course, than we have done right now, but still, you know what I mean? My mother, as an elementary teacher, would have never been able to afford a private schooling for me, send me to the US to study, you know what I mean? It's all been the results of that one decision that he made, 2 years prior to invest. So it's been, for me now, I see it as like, wow, it was a legacy for the unborn, because I wasn't even born back then when he purchased it. And now I'm on that same mission to create that legacy of prosperity for others, for families, for generations to come, for people I might never know, but for some reason, run into us now. And if we can share a little bit about what we've learned and how we've done it, I would have said it would have been a life well lived.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's amazing. Two things you said there. One is the kind of serendipity of the fact that your father did make this investment, and the cash flow from that was able to provide, your family an existence, and sounds like you were able to live fairly well, and that you were able to, make your way and do things.
Yeah. I mean, even learn English right now to be talking to you, Darren, because without going to a bilingual school, a private school back home, I would have not even learned the second language. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
Well, just the opportunities. I mean, again, and I don't know that everybody, I think so much of what I think people get without those kinds of experiences is kind of the here and now. It's all about money in, how fast can I spend the money kind of thing. But the fact that you had this, and then also that the Kiyosaki experience.
Yeah.
I know I've read a couple of his books, and I think my favorite that I've read was I think it's Cash Flow Quadrant. I think that one really spoke to me. Talk about the box there and the employee versus.
I might have it back here.
There it is.
Yeah, I think I have it ready.
There you go. Well, to me, it just, again, is that mindset shift from employee to an investor kind of thing, and just that mentality thing there. So that's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that with us.
You can't start a business with an employee mindset. That's something different. Also, it's probably a different discussion, but that's you're gonna have to give it your all. You're gonna have to say yes to everything at the beginning. You're gonna have to work 80-hour weeks now, so that you can live later like others are not willing to right now, and so on and so forth. But yeah, it was, we were doing it anyways, working for someone else. So what was the difference,
Sure. So I want to ask you, so you're in multiple asset classes. You started off, you did your first single family flip, and it sounds like that there were some challenges there. You found your way
We
to
actually
land.
we actually didn't go through with it, Darren. We chickened out.
Okay, because
We had our inspection period and we thought, oh my God, we're way over our heads. We chickened out and backed out of that.
okay,
So
okay,
we didn't even
but
do
you
the
didn't
first
stop.
clear. Yeah,
But
no,
you didn't stop there.
no.
So then, okay, so you find your way to land,
Mm-hmm.
and you recognize it's not about getting to the courthouse; it's getting to the people before the property shows up at the courthouse. If I understood
Yeah,
what you're saying. And you mentioned there that you perfected a letter, and
yeah.
I'm just curious about if you can share with us a little bit about maybe the first iteration and what, how long it took you to kind of work the kinks out to where your response was higher, to where you actually had a business. What kind of timeline was that?
So it was about 3 years,
Okay.
but it was, but we had small successes such that, the carrot but was big enough to continue exploring it. And both Jack and I are similar in that once we put our sights into something and we see that it is possible to have a little bit of success, that, that small success can translate into bigger explosive growth. It's about, we're both very perseverant. We're complete bulldogs when we decide that we're going to, perfect and master something. We're complete diehards. So that's one thing I think that helped us figure out the land and really go through many iterations of that letter where we would change, split testing, where you change, the first sentence, a word in the first sentence, and then you send, what you had before, and you go and test that, and then you see which of those wins, and then that winner one, you change another sentence, and you know what I mean? And it took a little bit, the letter plus the process in the background, how to buy it, how to sell it. We became students of online marketing, to be able to sell our land online. So it was a process, and eventually, we came across a model that is not something that we invented, but we came across a big auction company that was auctioning houses back in, I would say, 2002 or 3 here in Arizona. And we thought, wow, if they're auctioning houses, we could probably auction our properties, because we had no problem buying the properties. To this day, we're able to buy for 5 to 25 cents on the dollar very easily. For every 750 to 1,000 letters that we send, we get anywhere between 6 and 15 callbacks. And it's people that, just really don't want their property at all anymore. They're not just motivated, they just don't want it. And for many reasons, maybe we're dealing with the heirs, and the heirs live someplace else. Maybe they decided to buy 2 pieces of property at some point where they were going to retire, and they bought one here in Arizona and one in Florida. And they decided to, retire here in Arizona, but now the Florida one is, they don't have, and their kids don't want it, or divorce, or time circumstances, they need money for some reason, and they're willing to, let go of that property for very, very little money. So yeah, it took it, between the buying and the selling, it took us a little bit. And on the selling side, like I said, we became, students of online marketing, and then we came across this other model where we could flush 200 properties pretty much in one day. We were buying, having one a quarter, buying about 80 properties a month. And with a team of 20, 30 people at that point, it was a business. It continues to be a business right now. It's just that now we have so much more technology, so much more automation that goes into that. I'm able to do what I was able to do back then was a much smaller team. And yeah, the investments in technology and I would say in mentorship, in order to us be able to grow as business owners, and get out of that employee mindset, because it's not just hard work, the mindset, it's also working on strategy for your business, for growth, and so on and so forth, and building and recruiting amazing team that is there, to really make decisions like you would, if they are aligning with your vision, if they're aligning with your core values. I mean, a lot of those things I didn't understand when I started, you know what I mean? But I understand now. And we're able to continue to do it with a lot of ease and grace, and not have a JOB, even though the flipping of the land is a JOB, because if you do not send letters, if you are not selling, you are not going to have income coming in unless you sold a chunk of those properties, you know, on notes. But even that income is going to come to an end. You know, when they pay off the note, that passive cash flow comes to an end as well. So it's, we call that, you know, the land flips for cash, we call them one-time cash. The notes, we call them temporary cash. And, you know, the single families and apartment buildings, we call that forever cash. That's pretty much, you can sit on that asset, you know, for as long as you want to. And it'll, if you're operating it at a good, you know, in a good way, it's going to continue to spit out cash flow for you. And, I mean, hopefully for many generations to come, because that's what we want, you know, for Sophia. You know, I'm able to stand on the shoulders of my father, and I want her to stand on, you know, Jack and my shoulders, and, you know, grow this and continue building upon that for many generations to come.
No, I love that. That's that to me really is the power of real estate.
Yeah.
Wanted just to ask you real quick, you know, so you perfect a system in a particular asset class, raw land, right?
Yeah.
So many people get content or just they kind of keep the blinders on and they stay in their lane, if you will. And I find it kind of the rare few that are able to recognize opportunities in multiple asset classes, or be able to shift gears or recognize the opportunity. Can you speak a little bit to what it was that allowed you to say, okay, we've got this going, let's see what else we can do? Because you mentioned that
Yeah.
you went into single family local and then subsequently the multifamily.
Yeah, I think in part it's the entrepreneurial bug, in that entrepreneurs by nature are incredibly curious. And that, if you add that to, you know, a desire for always a bigger future, Jack and I are eternal optimists. And, you know, we're always of the belief that our future is going to be better than our past. And so in part was, I think it's that, and also, like I said, recognizing that one asset class doesn't entirely do the job for your long-term vision. You know what I mean? And that you will have to, you know, start looking elsewhere at some point. But it is incredibly important to, you know, when you're starting, because there's so many ways to skin this cat in real estate, to really focus. Otherwise, you do suffer, you know, the risk of shiny penny syndrome, and completely diverting your energy and having movement, but a lot of busy movement that doesn't bring you forward. So I would say for a period of almost 6 years, we really focus exclusively on mastery for the land, you know. And what I mean by mastery is like 4,000 flips, like iteration after iteration after iteration, because that repetition, you know, the scale allowed us repetition. We you know, that is an asset class that, because we're able to, you know, buy so many and sell so many quickly, that scale gives you the benefit of repetition. And with repetition comes what I call mastery. You know what I mean? You cannot master something you can't repeat. Like, you know, you can do, I don't know how many homes a year. And if you're doing, I don't know, 5 or 6, because it's a side hustle, because you have a main, you know, your main job, I don't know if you're going to get a lot of mastery from that. You're going to definitely learn. But if you have thousands and thousands of transactions, you know, what that scale allows is repetition, mastery. And once you have mastery in that one lane, like you call it, you know, it's like having a PhD in making money. And you can have, you know, you can find a head to the horse for that lane, because that lane is perfected. You know what I mean? And you can start, you know, focusing on, okay, where else can I innovate, or where else can I accelerate my growth of my cash, you know, my passive cash flow. And for us, you know, we kind of lifted our heads in 2009 after the 2008 recession, and everyone around us was losing their shirt. And we're like, oh my gosh, we continue flipping land. And, you know, let's go. Now it makes sense to buy $50,000 homes, put in their, you know, 5,000-10,000 repairs, and go rent them. Before, you know, prices here in Phoenix were outrageous. It really didn't make sense. So we just, you know, kept disciplined to what we knew how to do best, you know. And we specialize only in 3 types of properties, even in the land. You know, we don't look at all kinds of land. Either it's got to be infill lots, or path of growth lots, or recreational property that is no more than 2 hours away from a major city that is experiencing growth of some sort. You know what I mean? So, you know, in either way, I would say for the first two types of property, for the land, my exit, my buyer is a builder, is a financial, you know, buyer, you know, that has a financial mindset. And the third one is much more of a retail customer, someone that wants to go and, you know, hike, be able to go fishing here in the White Mountain Lakes area up in northern Arizona or wherever it is, you know, because we don't do it just in Arizona. We now do it across 17 states, and very little competition, because the last thing people think about when they think about real estate is a piece of land. But we don't specialize in, you know, the $1 million, you know, infill lot here in downtown Phoenix.
Right.
You know, I'm talking, there's a residential subdivision and there's houses everywhere and there's one infill lot. You know what I mean? That has been sitting there forever. Or path of growth, you know, between here, Phoenix, and Tucson. These two cities will eventually, you know, merge. You know, anything between here and there, here in Las Vegas. And it's not just in Phoenix, like you can find that same dynamic in Texas, in North Carolina, in Florida, you know what I mean? You find that same dynamic in many of the southern states, which we like to actually focus from the, you know, middle of the US south, so that we can market year round, because it's hard to market a piece of land when it's under, you know, a few feet of snow.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I can appreciate that
Yeah.
wholeheartedly.
So yeah.
So and I guess the thing that I love that you shared there is just the kind of the mastering the one that was actually a cash flow vehicle. I mean,
Yeah.
kind of like that really was kind of the vehicle that gave you the opportunity. And
That's how we got out of the rat race with the land, you know? Yeah.
Right. And it wasn't like you went from there and then you said, we're going to go do Amazon stores or something, but you stayed in real estate, recognized
yeah.
that the real estate, that there was another, and in that you were buying below the market. I mean, you were aware of what was going on in the market, which I think a lot of awareness is really what, you know, creates opportunity. I think that so often people are attracted to something with all the press, and that's at the height of the market, which is not necessarily the time to create an opportunity, or you know, it's an opportunity for the seller, but maybe not necessarily for the buyer to, you know, create instant equity. I want to ask you, given and today is May 27th, 2020, we're somewhere in the middle of this COVID crisis. States are reopening, but the economy has taken a major hit. Before we pressed record, we were talking a little bit, and I'd like, if you can, kind of speak to how the different asset classes are performing in this time of economic uncertainty.
Yeah. So in the land space, like I was sharing with you, we cannot, that's, the land is selling like hotcakes. We cannot keep it long enough. And I think it's partly possibly because people want to get out of their home in the city and have something to go and look forward to for a weekend without wearing a mask and without, you know, any risk of infection. You know, we're also seeing a lot of, you know, financial buyers right now, a lot of builders that were looking probably for times like now to go out there and buy. So there's an influx of also people looking for bargains out there. And so on the land, I continue seeing basically no difference in if anything, there's an improvement right now. And even over the long term, what was our, you know, experience back in 2008 was that, you know, land, the type of land that we specialize on is maybe lagging 6 months behind, you know, commercial and single family. And that if we see the effects, we're going to probably see the effects that we saw back then, which is we're going to have to buy for lower, you know, and sell for lower, you know. But if you can buy for lower, you can sell for lower and still make, you know, $10, $20, $30,000 profits, you know, spreads, because our typical spread is between $10,000 and $20,000 on a piece of land. And so we're going to continue to be able to generate those, just perhaps, you know, instead of 10 to 20, maybe they become, you know, $7,000 to $15,000. But it's still, I mean, it's still a good deal,
Right.
you know, from my perspective. And on the single family homes, what we have seen so far is 100% collections, you know, on all three markets. We're here in Phoenix, we're in Cleveland, and we're in Omaha, Nebraska, and our single family has 100% collection. You know, we anticipate that to remain that way. If anything, maybe, you know, a slight decrease. But I mean, we are, if anything here, the, you know, city of Phoenix is the only one where I could say, well, maybe some of, you know, I'm going to see some of my values drop, you know, in terms of, you know, the properties, but we are not necessarily an investor that is looking for appreciation when it comes to the single family. When we started investing in single family in 2009, you know, we were looking at 1960s homes that are brick built, that are not made out of the drywall, you know, or and that you know, there were brick built, that we thought if families need to, you know, come together and live together in order to come out of an economic, you know, situation, that it needs to be strong walls, a strong home, and so on and so forth. And so it was never with the mindset of like, oh my gosh, they're going to appreciate, which they did, you know, 4 or 5 times of what we paid for them. And some of the, you know, real estate that we bought here in Phoenix, we actually, when we hit that, you know, I would say 3 or 4 years ago, we started selling some of that, and, you know, and selling a home that I bought for 50,000, I sold it for 200, and then went again and started buying the same home in Cleveland for 50, and in Omaha, Nebraska for 50 again, you know what I mean? So out of one sale of one home, I was able to buy 4. And in other markets where basically they were at a different, you know, cycle, at a different part in the market, yeah? And so I predict that that will continue to happen. Like I said, we had the appreciation and we love it, but that's not what we're going for. We're going for the cash flow. And on the multifamily side, I have seen right now, you know, our property in Louisiana, North Carolina, and Oklahoma City, what we have is anywhere between 90 and 96% collection rate. And it's kind of normal to what we've experienced in the past without a pandemic, without an economic downturn. We're pretty much in line where we're at. And I think the reason why is that in 2 of those 3 markets, at least in 2 of those 3 markets, we have what we call a cone of prosperity from the government, in that I'm very close to, in North Carolina, to Fort Bragg, and I'm very close to Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma City. And a lot of the tenant base basically is either military or retired military. And if I do have, you know, a percentage of people that is workforce, people that might lose their jobs, it's much smaller than if you were in other areas, you know what I mean? Because of that, we've been able to mitigate, and we purchased those assets with that in mind, that if something was to happen in the economy, that we would want to have we call it a artificial cone of prosperity with a government agency, with a government as an employer, or a big employer like an Amazon or whatever, you know what I mean? I always look for such an economic cone of prosperity close by to the property where we're going to be buying. So, but it's still, you know, I know that we're probably gearing up to, you know, your risk mitigation, and I can already start talking about that on all 3, you know, asset classes. But specifically on the apartment side, you know, the biggest risk that we have right now is that for the percentage of the tenant base that is unemployed or that has lost their job, because it is work for housing, we buy C properties in B neighborhoods, you know, that if they've lost their job and unemployment, you know, gets cut down, that they might not be able to make their rent payment. So that's a big risk right there. Another risk is that, you know, the economic recovery is longer than expected, and that therefore, you know, we are having to carry, you know, a delinquency or a vacancy, you know, well, right now, not even a vacancy, because we cannot evict. So, you know, that we're carrying a delinquency for longer than we want to, you know what I mean? And some of the measures that we've taken, you know, in order to preserve cash, is, in the beginning, we overfunded in order to be able to have, you know, a well-capitalized asset, number one. But now we've pretty much cancel any big CapEx project for all 3 properties. We stopped already immediately because we were coming to the point where we were going to have to make payments, because on 2 of those 3 properties, we've syndicated the asset. And so we stopped, payments to our investors just out of precaution. And the properties have had amazing collection rates that I could have paid them, but I continue to hold on to that cash because I want to have a little bit more time and visibility into what happens right now come July, August, you know what I mean? In terms of where we're at, with the economy, where we're at with unemployment, and yeah, so those are some of the things that we're doing. But we hope that by being from an asset management perspective, a first-in-class community, because that's what we strive for. When we come across a C, class asset in a B neighborhood, we want to become the best C there is, such that if there is an economic pressure, that even people that are in a B property right now that might be slightly nicer, that when they have to downgrade, that they're going to downgrade into the next nicest C, which would be us. You know what I mean? So that's kind of how we're going about doing that, is just making sure that we're well capitalized. I'm not excited about forbearance at all. I believe in if I can pay my bills, pay my bills. And yeah, so now our conversation is starting to shift actually with, our investors and into opportunities, because we know that there are owners and operators of large multifamily that bought in the last year, even within the, last quarter of, 2019, that were expecting, and forecasting in their models rent increases of 3, 5, 7%, and now those increases are not materializing. I mean, there'll be opportunities out there for us to go and buy again, just like we bought here in Phoenix back in 2008. This time we're going to be buying large multifamily. So kind of positioning ourselves for that, having that, that conversation and opening that mindset to the investor that, that wants to invest with us, that this is the right time to buy, when this happens. And even though everyone else is trying to sell and trying to get out, that it's okay to be a contrarian, that it's okay to, you have to stomach and go against the grain of what everyone else is doing, because we've done it before and it's paid off tremendously. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Yeah.
No, I appreciate you sharing that with us. The the risk, like I do like to ask people, what they consider to be the biggest risk. Clearly, the economic uncertainty we're in, is it's going to create some opportunities. I mean, I think that's the one thing that's always, and I think your story has illustrated it well, is that when there is a situation, it's not only it's trouble for some, but it's opportunity for others that are well prepared.
Yeah, absolutely.
It sounds like you've been able to take advantage of that. So I appreciate you sharing that. Well, you knocked out the biggest risk question, and I appreciate you doing that. Michelle, where can the listeners go if they would like to learn more or connect with you?
If you're at all interested in learning about land, you can go to landprofitfund.com, because it's fun to make money with land. And so landprofitfund.com. You can also go to michellebosch.com. I'm sorry, Michelle Bosch, BOSCH. Yeah, from there you can connect with me on Facebook. I'm on Facebook as Michelle Bosch, Instagram, Michelle Bosch Official, and our podcast, Forever Cash podcast and the Inflow podcast.
Got it. Well, Michelle, I have enjoyed this immensely, and I can't say thanks enough for taking the time to talk. I've learned a lot, and I hope we can do it again soon.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. For our listeners, if you like this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Remember, the more you know, the more you grow. That's all we've got this week. Until next time, thanks for listening to Commercial Real Estate Pro Network's CREPN Radio.